Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The blood-red Ferrari LaFerrari cut through Fifth Avenue like a golden bullet. Its 950 horsepower roaring in perfect harmony with its driver's fury. Alexander Kane, 32 years old, tech billionaire and CEO of Kane Tech Industries, had exactly 17 minutes to reach the heliport and fly to the Hamptons, where his mother awaited him for another one of her conversations about the family's future. "Darn it," Alexander muttered, swerving around a yellow taxi that dared to enter his lane. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist read 3:43 p.m. He was late. The phone rang through the car's sound system. "Kane speaking," he responded curtly, without taking his eyes off the road. "Alex, where on earth are you?" Eleanor Kane's stern voice echoed through the Italian leather cabin. "You said you'd be here at 4. Mom, I'm in traffic. He'll be there in 15 minutes. Well, I hope so. We have important matters to discuss about your future and about Victoria." Alexander grimaced. Victoria Langford, daughter of one of the East Coast's most influential families, heiress to an oil fortune and his official suitor for 3 months, though they had barely exchanged 10 meaningful words. "Mom, we've already talked about this." "No, Alexander, you listen to this. Today, we're going to decide." The call ended abruptly. Alexander accelerated even more, overtaking a black SUV traveling in the right lane. What he didn't see was the young woman running desperately down the sidewalk, clutching a stack of resumes and frantically looking at her phone. Sofia Martinez, 28 years old, recent business administration graduate from NYU and currently unemployed, was having the worst day of her life. First, the plumbing in her tiny Brooklyn apartment had burst. Then, she missed her job interview because the subway broke down, and now she had exactly 12 minutes to get to another interview across town. Come on," she murmured, running down the sidewalk in her low-heeled shoes, the only professional ones she owned. New York's strong wind scattered her resumes, and she quickly bent down to collect them. It was at that moment that Alexander Kane, impatient billionaire and reckless driver, met his destiny. The Ferrari brakes screeched, but it wasn't enough. Sophia, who had thrown herself into the street to recover her papers, rolled over the car's hood like an action movie scene, landing on the other side with a dull thud. For 3 seconds, the world stopped. Alexander jumped out of the car, his heart beating like a war drum. The young woman was on the ground, surrounded by white sheets of paper, her eyes closed. "Oh my goodness, are you okay?" he shouted, kneeling beside her. "Someone call an ambulance." Sophia slowly opened her eyes, blinking several times. The first thing she saw was an absurdly handsome man with penetrating green eyes and a suit that cost more than she made in 6 months. "I'm fine," she said, trying to sit up. "My resumes? Where are my resumes?" "Your what?" Alexander frowned. "Ma'am, I just hit you with a $500,000 car and you're worried about papers." "Papers?" Sophia stared at him with growing incredulity. "These papers are my chance to get a job and pay my rent, something a rich guy like you obviously doesn't understand." A small crowd had formed around them. Some people were taking photos with their phones, whispering about the Ferrari and speculating about the driver's identity. "Look, let's handle this in a civilized manner," Alexander said, standing up and offering his hand to help her. "I'll pay your medical expenses, any damages. I don't need your charity." Sophia refused his hand and stood up on her own, though she was visibly hurt. "I need my resumes and to get to my interview." "What Alexander looked at his watch. Now he was 20 minutes late, for executive assistant at Kane Tech Industries, if that matters to you. Alexander stopped breathing for a moment. Of all the people in New York, of all the possible intersections, he had hit a job candidate for his own company. You're going to be interviewed at my company." "Your company." Sophia studied him more carefully. "Who are you?" "Alexander Kane, CEO of Kane Tech." The silence that followed was so profound you could hear the distant traffic. Sophia felt her stomach drop. She had just called her potential future boss a rich guy and refused his help. "Great," she murmured, collecting the crumpled resumes from the ground. "Just perfect." "Listen," Alexander said, a mischievous smile appearing on his face for the first time in months. "How about I give you a ride to the interview?" Sophia stared at him as if he had suggested they fly to the moon. "You're kidding me." I never kid about business or traffic accidents. I can't. This isn't appropriate. Alexander completed. Probably not. But you have an interview in 10 minutes, and I have the fastest car in Manhattan. Sophia looked at the Ferrari, then at her crumpled resumes, then at the man who had literally collided with her life. This is crazy, she said. Welcome to my Monday, Alexander replied, opening the passenger door. Getting in. Against all her better judgment, Sophia Martinez got into the most expensive car she had ever been in, next to the most dangerous man she had ever met. Dangerous not for what he had done, but for what she felt when their eyes met. The Ferrari roared back to life, and they sped toward both their destinies, unaware that this collision had not just been between car and person, but between two worlds about to clash irreversibly. By the way, Alexander said, accelerating down Madison Avenue, "You're hired." What? Sophia turned to him, incredulous. Anyone who survives being hit by me and still worries about their interview has exactly the kind of determination I'm looking for. You can't hire me like that. You don't even know me. I know you're brave, stubborn, and not easily impressed by money. Besides, he gave a smile that made Sophia's heart race faster than the Ferrari's engine. You're the first person in years who's told me exactly what they think. Sophia held tightly to the seat as they zigzagged through traffic. Her life had completely changed in a matter of minutes, and something told her this was just the beginning. This is going to be a lot of trouble, she murmured. I hope so, Alexander replied, and for the first time in years, he was genuinely excited to see what would happen next. The Caintech Industries building stretched 42 floors into the Manhattan sky, its glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun like a crystal tower. Sophia pressed her nose against the Ferrari's window, craning her neck to see the top. You own all of this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Well, technically the shareholders own it, Alexander replied, pulling into a reserved parking spot marked CEO only in bold letters. I just make all the decisions. Sophia stepped out of the car, her legs still slightly shaky from both the accident and the realization that she was about to work for one of the most powerful tech companies in America. Her reflection in the building's glass showed a woman with disheveled hair, a slightly torn blouse, and crumpled resumes clutched to her chest. I look like I've been hit by a car, she muttered. Technically, you have, Alexander said, straightening his tie. But don't worry about it. In this business, looking a little roughed up just means you're working hard. They walked through the impressive lobby, past a waterfall installation and modern art pieces that probably cost more than Sophia's college tuition. Employees in expensive suits hurried past, some stealing glances at their CEO walking beside a woman who clearly didn't belong to their world. Mr. Kane, a perfectly manicured woman in her 50s, approached them, her high heels clicking against the marble floor. You missed your 3:30 with the board. Your mother has called 6 times and Victoria Langford is waiting in your office. Alexander's jaw tightened. Thank you, Penelope. This is Sophia Martinez, our new executive assistant. Penelope's expertly penciled eyebrows rose slightly as she took in Sophia's appearance. I wasn't aware we were hiring today, Mr. Kane. It was a very spontaneous decision, Alexander said. Sophia, this is Penelope Reed, my current executive assistant. Penelope, I'd like you to show Sophia around and help her get settled. But sir, I don't understand. Penelope, Alexander's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Sophia will be working directly with me on special projects. Please set her up with everything she needs. Penelope's smile was as sharp as a blade. Of course, Mr. Kane. Right this way, Miss Martinez. As they walked toward the elevator, Sophia caught Alexander's arm. Wait, she whispered urgently. What exactly am I supposed to do? I don't know anything about your business. You'll figure it out, Alexander said with more confidence than he felt. You're smart, you're determined, and you're not afraid to speak your mind. That's exactly what I need. But Sophia, he turned to face her fully, and she was struck again by how green his eyes were. Trust me, and more importantly, trust yourself. The elevator doors opened, and Penelope stepped inside with the practiced grace of someone who had perfected the art of corporate warfare. Sophia followed, feeling like she was being led to her execution. So, Penelope said as they ascended to the 38th floor, how exactly do you know Mr. Kane? He ran me over with his car, Sophia replied honestly. Penelope's perfect composure cracked for just a moment. I'm sorry. What? About 20 minutes ago on 5th Avenue. Hence, the Sophia gestured to her disheveled appearance. "And he hired you, apparently." Penelope stared at her for a long moment, then let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "Well, that's certainly a first." The elevator opened onto a floor that looked like it had been designed by someone with unlimited budget and a fondness for intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan, while sleek furniture and state-of-the-art technology created an atmosphere of power and success. "Your desk," Penelope said, pointing to a workstation that was bigger than Sophia's entire apartment. Computer, phone, access cards, and she opened a drawer, revealing an expense account card for business purchases only, of course. Sophia picked up the card, noting her name was already embossed on it. "How is this possible? I was hired 15 minutes ago." "Mr. Kane is very efficient when he wants something," Penelope replied cryptically. "Now, let me show you the coffee machine. It's German, costs more than a small car, and makes the best espresso in Manhattan. You'll need to know how Mr. Kane likes his coffee, which is black, no sugar, and strong enough to wake the dead. He goes through about 6 cups a day, more during stressful periods." Sophia was frantically trying to take mental notes when a commotion erupted from the direction of Alexander's office. A woman's voice, cultured and sharp, cut through the air. "Alexander Kane, you cannot keep avoiding me." "That would be Miss Langford," Penelope said with the tone of someone announcing an incoming natural disaster. Through the glass walls of Alexander's office, Sophia could see a tall, elegant blonde woman in a designer dress that probably cost more than Sophia's rent. She was gesturing dramatically while Alexander stood behind his desk, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Should we do something?" Sophia asked. "Oh no, dear. We never interfere with Mr. Kane's personal life. Well, not directly anyway." Victoria Langford's voice rose higher. "Our families have been planning this engagement for months. You can't just pretend it's not happening." "Engagement," Sophia's voice squeaked. "Oh yes," Penelope said, clearly enjoying the drama. "It's all been arranged. Very traditional, very proper, very miserable," Sophia suggested. Penelope's smile was genuine for the first time since they'd met. "I was going to say advantageous, but your word works too." Alexander's office door flew open, and Victoria stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. She paused when she saw Sophia, taking in her appearance with the kind of look usually reserved for something unpleasant found on the bottom of a shoe. "And who might you be?" Victoria's voice could have frozen champagne. "Sophia Martinez, new executive assistant," Sophia replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "How interesting." Victoria's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Alexander does seem to be making quite a few spontaneous decisions lately." With that, she swept toward the elevator, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and barely concealed hostility. Alexander emerged from his office, loosening his tie and looking like he'd just survived a battlefield. "Penelope, please cancel all my appointments for the rest of the day. And Sophia," he paused, studying her face, "could I see you in my office?" Sophia's stomach dropped. "Am I fired already?" "Not yet," Alexander said with a tired smile. "But the day is young." Penelope watched them go, a thoughtful expression on her face. In 30 years of working for powerful men, she'd learned to read the signs. And everything about Alexander Kane's behavior today screamed that Sophia Martinez was about to turn his carefully ordered world completely upside down. "This," Penelope murmured to herself, "is going to be very interesting indeed." Inside his office, Alexander closed the door and turned to Sophia. "I owe you an apology. For which part? The car accident or throwing me into corporate politics? I don't understand." "Both, but mostly for not warning you about Victoria." Sophia sat down in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "Are you really engaged to her?" "Not if I can help it," Alexander said, dropping into his chair. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. "My mother believes that marriage should be a business arrangement. Victoria's family has oil money, political connections, and a reputation that would benefit the company. It's all very strategic." "And what do you believe?" "Until about an hour ago, I believed the same thing," Alexander admitted. "But then I met someone who rolled over my car hood and still worried about her job interview. Someone who told me exactly what she thought without caring about my bank account." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "Alexander, I know it's crazy. I know we just met, But I also know that in 32 years, no one has ever made me feel the way you did when you looked at me and saw a person instead of a portfolio." "You're right," Sophia said quietly. "It is crazy. The craziest part is that I don't care." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the day's events settling around them. Finally, Sophia spoke. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Alexander said, standing up with renewed energy, "we figure out how to work together without killing each other." And Sophia, "Yes, welcome to Kane Tech Industries. Try not to let anyone throw you off any more car hoods." Sophia laughed, and the sound filled the office like sunshine. "I'll do my best." As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the city, two people who had collided by accident began to realize that some of the best things in life happen when you least expect them. But neither of them noticed Penelope watching through the glass wall or the calculating look in her eyes as she picked up her phone to make a very important call. Sophia Martinez had never been one to back down from a challenge, but as she stared at her reflection in the ladies' room mirror at 6:47 a.m., she wondered if she'd finally bitten off more than she could chew. Her first official day at Kane Tech Industries was about to begin, and she felt like a fraud in her hastily purchased business attire, a black blazer and matching skirt that had consumed most of her savings, but still looked budget compared to what everyone else wore in this gleaming tower of capitalism. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection, adjusting the blazer for the 10th time. "You survived being hit by a Ferrari and hired by a billionaire in the same afternoon. How hard can corporate America be?" As it turned out, very hard. The elevator doors opened on the 38th floor to reveal Penelope Reed already at her desk, looking impossibly put together in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. Her silver hair was swept into a perfect chignon, and she was typing with the precision of a concert pianist. "Good morning, Sophia," Penelope said without looking up from her computer. "You're early. That's good. Mr. Kane will be in by 7:30, and he expects his coffee ready and his schedule reviewed before he arrives." "Right," Sophia said, setting down her purse at her new desk. "Coffee, black, no sugar, strong enough to wake the dead." "Exactly." Penelope finally looked up, and Sophia caught something that might have been approval in her eyes. "But first, we need to talk." Penelope stood and walked to the massive windows overlooking Manhattan, gesturing for Sophia to follow. The city spread out below them like a glittering circuit board, early morning traffic already beginning to snake through the urban canyons. "In 30 years of working in this business," Penelope began, her voice pitched low enough that no one else could hear, "I've learned that survival depends on understanding the rules, not the ones they write in employee handbooks, but the real rules, such as rule number 1, everyone is watching everyone else all the time. Rule number 2, information is currency, and secrets are the most valuable commodity in this building. Rule number 3, Alexander Kane is a good man, but he's been raised to see relationships as transactions." Sophia frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" Penelope turned to study her with sharp blue eyes. "Because yesterday I watched you walk into this company with nothing but determination and honesty, and I saw something I haven't seen in this place for a very long time, which is someone who might actually be good for him." Before Sophia could respond, the elevator chimed, and Alexander stepped out, looking every inch the billionaire CEO in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was still slightly damp from his morning shower, and he carried himself with the confident stride of someone who owned the world, or at least a significant portion of it. "Morning, Penelope." "Sophia." His eyes lingered on Sophia for just a moment longer than professionally necessary. "Coffee coming right up," Sophia said, grateful for something concrete to do. She made her way to the German coffee machine, which looked more like a piece of modern art than a kitchen appliance. Following Penelope's whispered instructions from the day before, she managed to produce a cup of coffee that smelled like liquid motivation. "Perfect," Alexander said after taking a sip. "Penelope, what's my schedule look like?" Board meeting at 9, followed by the quarterly review with the department heads. Lunch with the investors from Tokyo at 12:30, and Penelope paused meaningfully. Dinner with the Langford family at 7. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Right. The dinner. Your mother called to confirm." Penelope continued. "She wanted to remind you that this is an important evening for the family's future. My mother has very specific ideas about the future," Alexander said dryly. "Sophia, I'd like you to sit in on the board meeting this morning, take notes, observe, learn how we operate. Me, Sophia's voice squeaked slightly. In a board meeting, I don't know anything about. You know how to listen, how to think, and how to ask good questions. That's more than most people bring to these meetings. Penelope raised an eyebrow. Alexander, are you sure that's wise? The board members might find it irregular. The board members find my choice of lunch irregular, Alexander replied. They'll survive Sophia's presence. Besides, she needs to understand how this company works if she's going to be effective. 2 hours later, Sophia found herself sitting at a conference table that could have hosted a small United Nations meeting, surrounded by men and women whose combined net worth probably exceeded the GDP of several small countries. Shed filled 3 pages with notes she wasn't sure she understood. But Shed also noticed several things that clearly escaped the attention of the board members. The third quarter projections look solid, said Robert Harrington, a man in his 60s whose silver hair and expensive watch screamed old money. But I'm concerned about our expansion into the Southeast Asian markets. The concerns are noted, Robert, Alexander replied, but our research indicates significant opportunities in that region. Research conducted by whom? Asked Vanessa Whitmore, a sharp-faced woman who seemed to view every comment as a personal challenge. Our traditional consulting firms, or are we relying on newer, less proven sources? Sophia watched the subtle power plays around the table, the way certain board members aligned themselves with others, how information was shared or withheld based on unspoken alliances. It reminded her of the dynamics in her college group projects, except with billions of dollars at stake. Actually, Sophia said, then immediately regretted speaking when everyone turned to look at her. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, please, Alexander said, leaning forward with interest. What were you going to say? Sophia took a deep breath. I was just thinking about the Southeast Asian expansion. Have you considered partnering with local companies instead of trying to establish independent operations? From what I've read, many American companies struggle in those markets because they don't understand the cultural nuances, but local partnerships could provide that knowledge while reducing initial investment risks. The silence that followed felt like it lasted for an hour, though it was probably only 10 seconds. Then Robert Harrington started laughing. Well, I'll be damned, he said. The girl makes sense. Alexander, where did you find her? She found me, Alexander replied, and Sophia caught the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sophia, expand on that thought. For the next 20 minutes, Sophia found herself in the surreal position of contributing to a conversation about international business strategy, drawing on everything she'd learned in business school, plus insights from her own diverse background. She talked about cultural sensitivity, local market research, and the importance of building relationships rather than just establishing transactions. When the meeting ended, several board members approached her with business cards and expressions of interest. Vanessa Whitmore, who had seemed so intimidating earlier, actually smiled. Impressive debut, she said. Alexander, you might want to hang on to this one. That's the plan, Alexander replied. And something in his tone made Sophia's heart skip a beat. As the board members filed out, Alexander gathered his papers and turned to Sophia. Walk with me. They strolled down the hallway toward his office, passing employees who nodded respectfully to Alexander while stealing curious glances at Sophia. You did well in there, better than, well, actually, you brought a fresh perspective that we needed. I felt like I was speaking a foreign language half the time. Corporate speak is definitely its own dialect, but you also brought something we rarely see in these meetings. Common sense and genuine insight instead of political maneuvering. They reached his office and Alexander held the door open for her. Sophia, can I ask you something? Sure. What made you speak up? Most people in their first board meeting would have stayed silent. Sophia considered the question as she settled into one of the leather chairs across from his desk. I guess I figured if I'm going to fail, I might as well fail spectacularly while trying to contribute something useful. Alexander laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. That might be the most honest thing anyone said in this building in years. Their conversation was interrupted by Penelope's voice over the intercom. Mr. Kane, your mother is on line 1. Alexander's expression immediately sobered. Tell her I'll call her back. She said it's urgent. Something about tonight's dinner arrangements. Alexander sighed and picked up the phone. Hello, Mother. Yes, I remember. No, I don't think that's necessary. Mother, we've discussed this. Sophia tried not to listen, but it was impossible to ignore the tension in Alexander's voice as the conversation continued. When he finally hung up, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Everything okay?" Sophia asked. "My mother has decided that tonight's dinner with the Langfords should include an announcement," Alexander said, rubbing his temples. Apparently, she and Victoria's mother have been planning an engagement announcement for the society pages. "An announcement? But you're not actually engaged." "No. But try explaining that to two women who've been planning this alliance since Victoria and I were in prep school." Sophia felt a strange twist in her stomach at the mention of Victoria's name. "What are you going to do?" "I have no idea," Alexander admitted. "For the first time in my adult life, I genuinely have no idea what to do." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Sophia spoke. "Can I make a suggestion? Please, tell the truth." Alexander looked at her as if Shed suggested he juggle fire. "The truth. Radical concept, I know. But what if you just told your mother and the Langfords that you're not ready for marriage, that you want to focus on the company or travel or find yourself or whatever excuse feels most comfortable?" "Sophia, you don't understand the pressure." "You're right, I don't," Sophia interrupted gently. "I grew up in a family where we barely had enough money to worry about social expectations. But I do understand what it feels like to live someone else's version of your life instead of your own." Alexander stared at her for a long moment. "How did you get so wise?" "Student loans and determination," Sophia replied with a smile. "Plus, sometimes it's easier to see solutions when you're looking at a problem from the outside." Before Alexander could respond, Penelope appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Victoria Langford is here to see you. She says it's about tonight's dinner." Sophia stood immediately. "I should go." "No," Alexander said firmly. "Stay, please. I might need a witness to whatever's about to happen." Victoria entered the office like she was walking onto a red carpet, dressed in a pale pink designer dress that probably cost more than Sophia's car. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless despite the early hour. "Alexander, darling," Victoria said, moving to kiss his cheek. "We need to discuss tonight's arrangements. Victoria, you remember Sofia Martinez, my executive assistant?" Victoria's smile could have frozen champagne. "Of course, how quaint that you're still here. Sophia is proving to be invaluable," Alexander said, and Sophia noticed he didn't move away from Victoria's proximity, though his body language suggested he wanted to. "I'm sure she is," Victoria replied in a tone that suggested she was sure of no such thing. "Alexander, Mother and I have been discussing the announcement tonight, and we've decided." "We've decided." Alexander's voice carried a dangerous edge that Sophia had never heard before. "Well, our mothers have decided, really. The engagement should be announced at the beginning of dinner, before the champagne toast. I've already spoken to the Times about running the announcement in Sunday's society section." Sophia watched Alexander's face carefully and saw something flash in his eyes. Not anger exactly, but something deeper and more dangerous. "Victoria," Alexander said quietly, "we need to talk privately." "Oh, but surely Sophia can hear this," Victoria said with false sweetness. "After all, she'll need to know about these changes in your personal life if she's going to be working so closely with you." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sophia started to stand again, but Alexander's voice stopped her. "Sophia, please stay." He turned to Victoria. "And Victoria, let me be very clear about something. There will be no engagement announcement tonight because there is no engagement." Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Alexander, you can't be serious. Our families have been planning. We haven't been planning anything. You and I have barely had a real conversation in the 3 months since this arrangement began. That's what the engagement period is for," Victoria replied, though her voice was less certain now. "To get to know each other better. Victoria, you're a lovely person and you deserve someone who's genuinely excited to marry you. That person isn't me." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked from Alexander to Sophia and back again, and Sophia saw the exact moment when understanding dawned in her eyes. "I see," Victoria said quietly, "and I suppose this sudden change of heart has nothing to do with your new assistant. This has everything to do with me realizing that I want to make my own choices about my life," Alexander replied. "Choices based on what I want, not what's expected of me. Victoria stood gracefully, smoothing down her dress. Well, this is certainly an interesting development. I wonder what your mother will say. I'll deal with my mother. Oh, I'm sure you will. Victoria picked up her purse and walked toward the door, pausing to look back at Sophia. Enjoy your new position, Miss Martinez. I have a feeling it's going to be more challenging than you anticipated. After Victoria left, Alexander slumped back in his chair and loosened his tie. Well, that went better than expected. Better? Sophia stared at him. You just broke up with your fiancée. She was never really my fiancée. She was my mother's business arrangement. Alexander looked at Sophia with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sophia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay, do you think I'm making a terrible mistake? Sophia considered the question carefully. I think you're making a brave choice. Scary, maybe. Complicated, definitely, but not terrible. Even though I've known you for exactly 26 hours, especially because you've known me for exactly 26 hours, Sophia replied. Sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that don't make sense on paper. Alexander smiled, and Sophia felt that familiar flutter in her chest. Penelope was right about you. What did she say? That you might actually be good for me. Before Sophia could respond, Penelope's voice came over the intercom again, this time with barely concealed amusement. Mr. Kane, your mother is on line 1 again. She sounds displeased. Alexander and Sophia looked at each other and burst into laughter. I suppose I should take this, Alexander said, reaching for the phone. I suppose you should. Sophia agreed. Good luck, Sophia. Yes. Thank you for everything. As Sophia left Alexander's office, she could hear his voice through the closed door, calm and steady, as he began what was clearly going to be a very difficult conversation with his mother. She settled at her desk and tried to focus on the stack of documents Penelope had left for her to review, but her mind kept wandering to the look in Alexander's eyes when Head said she might be good for him. Penelope appeared at her elbow with a fresh cup of coffee. That was well done, she said quietly. What was? Giving him the courage to choose himself over expectations. Penelope paused. But you should know that Eleanor Kane doesn't lose gracefully. And neither does Victoria Langford. Sophia looked up from her papers. Is that a warning? It's a fact, Penelope replied. What you do with it is up to you. As the morning turned to afternoon, Sophia threw herself into learning everything she could about Kane Tech Industries, about Alexander's schedule, about the delicate ecosystem of corporate politics Shed suddenly found herself navigating. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that her real education was just beginning. And somewhere across town in a Park Avenue penthouse, Eleanor Kane was making phone calls of her own, each one designed to remind her son exactly what happened to people who defied family expectations. The game was just getting started. The phone call with Eleanor Kane had lasted exactly 47 minutes, and by the end of it, Alexander felt like he'd been through a corporate restructuring, a hostile takeover, and a natural disaster all at once. His mother's voice still echoed in his ears as he sat in his office at 8:30 that evening, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter with a million lights while Sophia worked quietly at her desk outside. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Alexander, Eleanor had said, her voice carrying the kind of ice that could freeze champagne mid-pour. The Langford alliance isn't just about marriage. It's about securing Kane Tech's future for the next generation. Without their political connections and oil investments, we're vulnerable to every market fluctuation, every regulatory change, every competitor with deeper pockets. Mother, we've built this company on innovation, not on arranged marriages, Alexander had replied, though he could feel his resolve wavering under the weight of her disappointment. Innovation doesn't protect you from government investigations, Alexander. Innovation doesn't guarantee favorable trade agreements. Victoria Langford's father sits on 3 congressional committees and has the Treasury Secretary's personal phone number. That's not romance, that's business sense. The conversation had continued in that vein, with Eleanor Kane systematically dismantling every argument Alexander could muster, while simultaneously expressing her profound disappointment in his sudden emotional instability. Shed hung up with a promise to drive down from the Hamptons the next morning to discuss the situation properly, which in Eleanor Kane's vocabulary meant with lawyers, financial advisors, and enough social pressure to crack granite. Now, as Alexander stared out at the city head conquered professionally, but felt increasingly alienated from personally, He wondered if Sofia Martinez had any idea what kind of storm Shed walked into when Shed literally crashed into his life. Through the glass wall of his office, he could see Sofia hunched over a stack of quarterly reports, a pencil tucked behind her ear, and a look of intense concentration on her face. Shed changed out of her blazer hours ago, and her white blouse was slightly wrinkled from the long day. Somehow, she looked more real than anyone else in this gleaming tower of ambition and careful image management. "Sofia," he called through the open door. "It's almost 9. You should go home." She looked up, blinking as if Shed forgotten where she was. "I'm just trying to understand these market penetration analyses. If I'm going to be useful in meetings, I need to know what everyone's talking about." Alexander walked over to her desk, noting the careful notes Shed taken in neat handwriting that somehow managed to look both professional and personal. "You've been studying for 6 hours straight. Even Harvard business students take breaks." "I didn't go to Harvard," Sofia replied, stretching her arms above her head. "I went to NYU on partial scholarships and student loans that'll take me 15 years to pay off. I don't have the luxury of taking anything for granted. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone, Sofia. You already did that in the board meeting this morning." Sofia looked up at him with those dark eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed executive persona. "Yes, I do have to prove myself, especially now." "What do you mean?" Sofia set down her pencil and turned to face him fully. "Alexander, I saw the way Victoria looked at me today. I heard the edge in your mother's voice when Penelope mentioned my name on the phone. I know that half the people in this building think you hired me for reasons that have nothing to do with my qualifications. And what do you think?" "I think," Sofia said carefully, "that you hired me because you needed someone who would tell you the truth instead of what you wanted to hear. But I also think that if I'm going to survive in this world, I need to be so obviously competent that no one can question why I'm here." Alexander sat on the edge of her desk, a gesture that would have been scandalous if anyone else had been around to see it. "Sofia, you don't have to carry the weight of everyone's assumptions. Don't he?" Sofia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Alexander, I'm a first-generation college graduate from a working-class family who got this job because I literally ran into you in the street. Do you have any idea how that looks to people like Victoria Langford? I don't care how it looks to Victoria, but you care how it looks to your mother and your board of directors and your investors." Sofia's voice was gentle but firm. "And you should care because this company employs thousands of people whose livelihoods depend on your ability to navigate these relationships successfully." Alexander stared at her for a long moment. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Cut straight through all the noise and get to the heart of what really matters." Sofia smiled, and the expression transformed her entire face. "Practice and desperation. When you grow up with parents who work 3 jobs between them just to keep the lights on, you learn to focus on what's actually important versus what just feels important." "Tell me about them," Alexander said, surprising himself. "Your parents," Sofia's expression softened. "My dad, Javier, came here from Mexico when he was 17. He worked construction during the day and took English classes at night. My mom, Rosa, was born in Brooklyn, but her parents were from Dominican Republic. She's a nurse at Bellevue, has been for 22 years. They must be proud of you." "They are, but they're also worried." Sofia picked up her pencil again, turning it over in her hands. "They've seen what happens when people from our neighborhood try to move into worlds they weren't born into. Sometimes it works out. More often it doesn't." "And what do you think?" "I think," Sofia said slowly, "that I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Before Alexander could respond, the elevator chimed, and both of them turned to see Penelope stepping out, followed by 2 people who definitely hadn't been invited. The first was Eleanor Kane, Alexander's mother, looking exactly like what she was: old money, political connections, and enough social armor to deflect criticism from lesser mortals. At 62, she was still beautiful in the way that expensive maintenance and good genetics could preserve. Her silver hair styled in a way that managed to look both current and timeless. Her navy blue suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. The second person was someone Sofia had never seen before, but who radiated the same kind of understated power as Eleanor Kane. He was perhaps 50 with graying temples and the kind of tan that came from yacht ownership rather than construction work. His suit was perfectly tailored. His shoes were Italian leather, and his smile was the kind that never quite reached his eyes. "Alexander," Eleanor said, her voice carrying across the floor like a royal proclamation. "We need to talk." Alexander stood slowly, and Sophia could see him transforming before her eyes. The relaxed, almost vulnerable man she'd been talking to disappearing behind layers of corporate armor. "Mother, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Plans change, darling, especially when one's son decides to blow up decades of careful family planning in a single afternoon." Eleanor's gaze swept over Sophia with the precision of a professional appraisal. And this must be the young woman who's caused such a stir. Sophia stood as well, grateful that she'd spent the afternoon studying corporate protocols. "Mrs. Kane, I'm Sophia Martinez." "Yes, I've heard quite a lot about you today." Eleanor's smile was perfectly polite and absolutely lethal. "Edward, this is Sophia Martinez, Alexander's new executive assistant." "Sophia, this is Edward Langford, Victoria's father." Sophia felt her stomach drop. Edward Langford studied her with the kind of attention usually reserved for potential acquisitions or threats to national security. "Miss Martinez," Edward said, extending his hand. "Victoria mentioned she'd met you." "Yes, sir. Briefly." Penelope appeared at Sophia's elbow with a silent efficiency that had made her invaluable for 3 decades. "Mrs. Kane. Mr. Langford, would you like coffee?" "Water." "This won't take long," Eleanor replied, her attention focused entirely on her son. "Alexander, we need to discuss your decision regarding Victoria." "There's nothing to discuss, Mother. I've made my choice." "Have you?" Edward spoke for the first time since the introductions, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from congressional committees and Treasury Department connections. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you've made an impulsive decision based on." His gaze flicked to Sophia. "Recent developments." Sophia felt the blood rise in her cheeks, but before she could speak, Alexander stepped forward. "Mr. Langford, with all due respect, my personal decisions aren't subject to board approval, are they?" Eleanor's voice was silk over steel. "Alexander, Kane Tech Industries isn't just a company, it's a legacy. Your father built this firm on the understanding that business and family are inseparable. Every decision you make reflects on the company's stability, its reputation, its ability to attract and maintain investor confidence. And what exactly are you suggesting?" Edward Langford pulled out his phone and showed Alexander the screen, the preliminary reports from this afternoon's market activity. Kane Tech stock dropped 2.5 points after rumors began circulating about the canceled engagement. Alexander frowned. "What rumors?" "Social media is a wonderful thing," Eleanor said, with the tone of someone discussing a particularly virulent disease. "Victoria was understandably upset after your conversation today. She may have mentioned the situation to a few friends. Those friends have friends in the financial press." Sophia watched Alexander's face carefully and saw the exact moment when he realized the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about his personal life anymore. It was about the livelihoods of everyone who worked for Kane Tech. "What do you want?" Alexander asked quietly. "We want you to think carefully about the consequences of your actions," Edward replied. "Victoria is willing to overlook this afternoon's misunderstanding. The engagement can proceed as planned. And if it doesn't..." Eleanor and Edward exchanged a look that made Sophia's skin crawl. There was something predatory about it, like sharks circling wounded prey. "Alexander," Eleanor said gently, "Edward sits on the Senate Banking Committee. He also has significant influence with the Federal Trade Commission. Kane Tech has been remarkably successful at avoiding regulatory scrutiny. But that kind of protection requires ongoing relationships. The subtle threat was so subtle that someone without Sophia's background might have missed it entirely. But Sophia had grown up watching her parents navigate systems designed to exclude them. And she recognized extortion when she heard it, no matter how politely it was phrased. "You're threatening him," Sophia said before she could stop herself. All 3 heads turned toward her with expressions ranging from surprise to calculation to barely contained fury. "I beg your pardon." Eleanor's voice could have frozen the Hudson River. "You're threatening him," Sophia repeated, her voice stronger now. "You're telling him that if he doesn't marry your daughter, you'll use your political connections to damage his company. That's not family planning or business strategy. That's blackmail." The silence that followed was so complete that Sophia could hear the air conditioning humming 40 floors above the street. Edward Langford was the first to speak, his voice very quiet and very dangerous. "Miss Martinez, You seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding of how business relationships work at this level." "No, I understand perfectly," Sophia replied, surprising herself with her own courage. "I understand that you're using your daughter as a political pawn and threatening a man's life's work to force him into a marriage he doesn't want. What I don't understand is why you think that's acceptable." "Sophia," Alexander said quietly, perhaps I should what? Stay quiet while these people destroy everything you've worked for, because you had the audacity to think you should choose your own wife." Eleanor Kane studied Sophia with newfound interest. "You have spirit, dear. He'll give you that. But spirit without wisdom is simply foolishness. Alexander has responsibilities that extend far beyond his personal preferences. And what about his right to happiness?" "Happiness," Edward said with a laugh that contained no warmth, "is a luxury that people in Alexander's position can't afford." "That's where you're wrong," Sophia said, turning to face Alexander. "Happiness isn't a luxury. It's what makes everything else worthwhile. And if you give that up, if you let them force you into a life you don't want, then what's the point of all this success?" Alexander looked at Sophia for a long moment, then at his mother, then at Edward Langford. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "Mr. Langford, I appreciate your family's friendship and your business relationship with Kane Tech, but I won't be marrying Victoria. Not now, not ever." Edward's face darkened. "Alexander, I don't think you understand the implications. I understand them perfectly, and I've made my decision." "Then you're a fool," Eleanor said, her composure finally cracking. "And you're going to destroy everything your father built." "My father built this company to give people opportunities," Alexander replied. "He would have understood my choice." Eleanor Kane gathered her purse and stood with the kind of dignity that only came from generations of practice. "Edward, I believe we're done here." Edward Langford stood as well, but paused to look directly at Sophia. "Miss Martinez, I hope you understand that choices have consequences for everyone involved." After they left, the office felt strangely empty, as if a tornado had passed through and left everything looking normal, but fundamentally changed. Alexander slumped into his chair and ran his hands through his hair. "Well, that went about as well as expected." "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, moving to sit across from him. "I don't know. Ask me tomorrow when I see what the stock market thinks of my decision." Sophia was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "Alexander, what if they're right? What if this decision damages the company? Then, well, figure out how to fix it together." "Together." Alexander looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sophia, I need you to know something. Everything that just happened, the threats, the pressure, the implications for the company, none of that is your fault. This conflict has been building for years. But I'm the catalyst. No, you're the reason I finally had the courage to stand up for what I believe in." Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Alexander, I've put you in an impossible position. You've shown me that some positions are worth fighting for." Before Sophia could respond, Penelope appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and a look of grim satisfaction. "I take it the meeting didn't go as Mrs. Kane expected?" she asked. "Not exactly," Alexander replied. "Penelope, I'm going to need you to schedule a meeting with our legal team tomorrow morning and our PR department and probably our head of security." Expecting trouble, Alexander looked at Sophia, then back at Penelope. "Let's just say I think we should be prepared for anything." Penelope nodded and turned to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, Alexander, I think you made the right choice. Your father would have been proud." After Penelope left, Alexander and Sophia sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both processing the events of the last hour. "Sophia," Alexander finally said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay, are you having second thoughts about any of this? About the job? About getting involved in my family drama? About—" He gestured vaguely between them. Sophia considered the question carefully. 2 days ago, my biggest worry was making rent. Now I'm apparently part of some corporate dynasty power struggle that could affect thousands of jobs. So yeah, I'm terrified. But, Sophia smiled and the expression lit up her entire face, but I've never felt more alive or more sure that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Alexander felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't even realized was tight, even knowing what we're up against. Especially knowing what we're up against, Alexander. I've spent my whole life fighting for things that mattered. This is just a different kind of fight. What if we lose? Then we lose together, Sophia said simply. But what if we win? What would winning look like to you? Sophia thought for a moment. A company that succeeds because it does the right thing, not because it makes the politically convenient choices. A workplace where people are valued for their contributions, not their connections. And she paused, suddenly shy. And a life built on honesty instead of expectations. Alexander stood and walked around his desk to where Sophia was sitting. Sophia Martinez, you are going to turn my world completely upside down. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Ask me in a few months, Alexander said, offering her his hand. But right now, I'm thinking it might be the best thing that's ever happened to me. Sophia took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They stood there for a moment, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Alexander, yes, your mother is going to try to destroy me. Probably, Edward Langford is going to use every political connection he has to damage Kane Tech. Almost certainly. And Victoria is going to make my life as difficult as possible. Without question. Sophia grinned. Good thing I like a challenge. Alexander laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the empty office. Sophia Martinez, I think you might be the bravest person I've ever met. Or the craziest. In my experience, they're usually the same thing. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the office, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the building across the street, or the telephoto lens capturing their every interaction. In the game they'd chosen to play, information was power, and someone was making sure they had plenty of both. The war for Alexander Kane's future had officially begun, and Sophia Martinez had just painted a very large target on her back. But as she walked out of Kane Tech Industries that night, her hand brushing against Alexander's as they waited for the elevator, she couldn't bring herself to regret a single moment of the collision that had brought them together. Some fights she was learning were worth the risk. Sophia Martinez had never imagined that her morning routine would include checking financial news websites before brushing her teeth, but that had become her reality over the past 3 weeks since the confrontation with Eleanor Kane and Edward Langford. As she sat in her tiny Brooklyn apartment at 5:47 a.m., laptop balanced on her knees and coffee growing cold on the nightstand, she scrolled through the latest headlines with a mixture of dread and determination. Kane Tech stock continues volatile trading amid leadership questions. Read the Wall Street Journal headline. Below that, Forbes had published an analysis piece titled, "When Personal Choices Affect Corporate Performance, a Case Study in Modern Business Leadership." And there, buried in the business section of the New York Times, was a particularly vicious opinion piece that made Sophia's stomach clench. The Rise and Fall of Alexander Kane, How One Woman Destroyed a Business Dynasty. The article, written by someone with obvious access to insider information, painted Sophia as a calculating opportunist who had manipulated her way into Alexander's life for financial gain. It detailed her working-class background with the kind of specificity that could only come from professional investigation, described her student loans as evidence of desperation, and suggested that her rapid promotion within Kane Tech was evidence of unethical behavior on both her part and Alexander's. What made it worse was how close some of it came to her own fears. Late at night when she couldn't sleep, Sophia sometimes wondered if she really was in over her head, if she was causing more harm than good, if Alexander would be better off without the complications Shed brought into his carefully ordered world. But then she remembered the look in his eyes when he talked about finally making his own choices, the way his entire demeanor changed when he was allowed to be himself instead of the perfect corporate air his mother had designed. She remembered his laugh, his genuine curiosity about her background, the way he listened to her ideas, not because he was being polite, but because he genuinely valued her perspective. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Don't read the Times opinion piece. It's garbage, written by people who don't know you." Sophia smiled despite herself and typed back, "Too late, but thanks for the warning. Penelope's making extra strong coffee this morning. You'll need it for what we're facing today." Sophia's smile faded as she remembered what was scheduled for this particular Friday, the quarterly shareholders meeting, where Alexander would have to face not just the board of directors, but hundreds of investors who had watched Kane Tech's stock price fluctuate wildly over the past month. It would be the first public forum where he'd have to address the speculation about his personal life and its impact on the company, and Sophia would be there sitting in the front row, probably generating more headlines just by existing. She closed the laptop, showered quickly, and dressed in her most conservative business suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that Penelope had helped her select during a shopping trip that had felt more like military tactical planning. "When you're under attack," Penelope had explained while Sophia tried on outfit after outfit, "your appearance becomes part of your armor. Every detail matters." The subway ride into Manhattan gave Sophia time to review her notes for the meeting. Over the past 3 weeks, she had thrown herself into understanding every aspect of Kane-Tech's business with an intensity that impressed even Alexander. She could now discuss market penetration strategies, regulatory compliance issues, and competitive analysis with the kind of fluency that would have amazed her professors at NYU. But more than that, she had become an integral part of Alexander's daily operations. She attended his meetings, contributed to strategic planning sessions, and had developed a reputation for asking the kinds of questions that cut through corporate speak to get to the heart of real issues. Several department heads had started coming to her directly when they needed to present difficult information to Alexander, knowing that she would help them frame it in a way that was both honest and constructive. The relationship between them had deepened too, though they had been careful to maintain professional boundaries in the office. There had been late dinners while working on quarterly reports, conversations that stretched far beyond business topics, moments when their hands touched while reaching for the same document and neither pulled away immediately. The attraction was obvious to anyone who cared to look, but they had both agreed without explicitly discussing it that timing was everything, and this was not the time for romantic complications. When Sophia arrived at Kane-Tech that morning, she found the building surrounded by news vans and reporters. Security guards were checking IDs more carefully than usual, and there was a tension in the air that reminded Sophia of her neighborhood during particularly bad storms. Everyone moving quickly, heads down, trying to get to safety before the worst hit. Penelope was waiting for her at the elevator with a grim expression and an extra-large coffee. "How are you holding up, dear, like a boxer in the 12th round?" Sophia replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Still standing, but not sure how much more I can take." "Today is going to be rough," Penelope warned as they rode up to the 38th floor. "The shareholders are angry about the stock volatility. The board is nervous about the regulatory threats. And Alexander," she paused. "Alexander is trying to hold everything together while his family systematically undermines him." "What do you mean?" Penelope handed Sophia a folder. "Eleanor Kane has been busy. She's convinced 3 board members to call for a vote of no confidence if Alexander doesn't resolve his personal situation by the end of the month. She's also been spreading rumors about his stability and judgment to anyone who will listen." Sophia opened the folder to find printouts of social media posts, leaked emails, and what appeared to be private investigator reports about her own background. The level of detail was staggering. They had found out about her father's immigration status, her mother's work schedule, even her college GPA, and the jobs she had held to pay for school. "How is this legal?" Sophia asked, flipping through page after page of her own life laid bare. "Technically, it's not illegal to investigate someone's background, especially if that person is in a position of influence at a major corporation," Penelope explained, "and Eleanor Kane has enough connections to make sure the investigation stays within legal boundaries, even if it violates every principle of decency." "Penelope, maybe I should just quit if my being here is causing this much damage to the company." "Sophia Martinez, don't you dare." Penelope's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you know what I've seen in 30 years of working for powerful men? I've seen them make decisions based on fear, greed, political expediency, and ego. You know what I've never seen until you walked into this building. Someone making decisions based on what's actually right." Before Sophia could respond, Alexander emerged from his office, looking like a man preparing for battle. His suit was immaculate, his hair perfectly styled, but Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders and the shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much either. "Good morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as someone can be for public humiliation," Sophia replied with a smile that she hoped looked more confident than she felt. Alexander's expression softened. "Sophia, you don't have to be there today. You could work from home, avoid the media circus. Alexander Kane, if you think I'm going to let you face this alone, you obviously haven't been paying attention for the past month. The reporters are going to tear you apart. Then they'll have to get through me first," Penelope said firmly. "And I've been dealing with corporate vultures longer than most of them have been alive." Alexander looked between the 2 women who had become his closest allies, and felt something that might have been hope. In that case, let's go show them what we're made of. The shareholders' meeting was held in Caintek's main auditorium, a sleek space that could accommodate nearly 500 people. By the time Sophia, Alexander, and Penelope arrived, it was packed with investors, reporters, and what appeared to be several representatives from competing tech companies who had no legitimate reason to be there except to watch the potential downfall of a major rival. Sophia took her seat in the front row, acutely aware of the cameras that swiveled to follow her movement, and the whispered conversations that erupted whenever someone recognized her from the news coverage. She kept her expression neutral and her posture confident, channeling every lesson her mother had taught her about dignity under pressure. Alexander took the stage with the kind of commanding presence that had made him a billionaire by 32. For the first 20 minutes, he delivered a presentation about Caintek's financial performance that was so thoroughly professional and data-driven that even the most hostile questioners had to acknowledge that the company was actually performing better than it had in years. Our third quarter profits are up 18% over last year, Alexander explained, clicking through slides that showed impressive growth across multiple sectors. We've expanded into 3 new international markets, launched 2 innovative product lines, and increased our workforce by 12% while maintaining industry-leading employee satisfaction ratings. A hand shot up from the middle of the auditorium. Sophia recognized the man as Robert Harrington, one of the board members who had initially been supportive, but had grown increasingly critical as the media coverage intensified. Mr. Kane, while the financial numbers are certainly encouraging, there's an elephant in the room that we need to address. The volatility in our stock price over the past month has cost shareholders millions of dollars. How do you respond to suggestions that your personal decisions have compromised your ability to lead this company effectively? Alexander had been preparing for this question for weeks, but Sophia could see his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Mr. Harrington, I appreciate your concern about stock volatility. However, I would point out that market fluctuations based on speculation and rumors are temporary, while the fundamental strength of our business operations provides long-term value for our shareholders. But surely you can't deny that the speculation is directly related to your decision to break off your engagement to Victoria Langford. The auditorium fell silent. Sophia could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward her, and she forced herself to sit perfectly still, despite the urge to either flee or stand up and defend Alexander herself. My personal relationships are not subject to shareholder approval, Alexander replied calmly. I was elected to this position based on my ability to lead this company, not on my willingness to enter into arranged marriages for business purposes. A reporter in the back raised her hand. Mr. Kane, there are reports that your relationship with your executive assistant, Sofia Martinez, began before you ended your engagement. How do you respond to suggestions that you've compromised professional ethics for personal reasons? Sophia felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression neutral. This was the moment she had been dreading, when her presence would become a liability that Alexander would have to defend publicly. Those reports are completely false, Alexander said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that Sophia had never heard before. Miss Martinez was hired based solely on her qualifications, and has proven herself to be one of the most valuable members of our team. Any suggestion otherwise is not only factually incorrect, but professionally insulting to a woman who has contributed more to this company in 1 month than some people do in years. Another hand shot up, this one from a woman Sophia didn't recognize. Mr. Kane, given the ongoing scrutiny and its impact on company performance, wouldn't it be in everyone's best interest for you to step back from your personal relationship with Ms. Martinez, at least until the situation stabilizes? Sophia felt something inside her break. This was exactly what she had feared. That loving Alexander, because that's what this was, even though neither of them had said it out loud, would become a weapon that his enemies could use against him. She started to stand, ready to announce her resignation right there in front of 500 people, when Alexander's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd like a sword. No, he said simply. It would not be in anyone's best interest for me to make decisions based on fear, intimidation, or political pressure. This company was built on the principle that good ideas and hard work matter more than family connections or social expectations. Miss Martinez represents everything that's best about that principle. He paused, looking directly at Sophia for a moment before turning back to the crowd. I want to be very clear about something. Sofia Martinez is not just an exceptional employee. She's an exceptional person who has made me a better leader and this company stronger. Any attempt to use her as a weapon against either of us will fail because I refuse to sacrifice good people for political convenience." The silence that followed was deafening. Sofia felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined not to give the cameras any footage that could be used against them later. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the auditorium, a voice called out, "Question for Miss Martinez." All eyes turned to Sofia, and she felt her stomach drop. This wasn't part of the plan. Shareholders' meetings were supposed to be between company leadership and investors, not opportunities to put employees on trial. Alexander stepped forward. "Miss Martinez is not a company officer and is not required to answer questions in this forum." "Ill answer," Sofia said, standing up before she could lose her courage. If they wanted to make her part of this fight, then she was going to fight back. The auditorium fell silent again. As Sofia walked to the front of the room, Alexander stepped aside to give her access to the microphone, and she could see both pride and concern in his eyes. "Thank you," Sofia said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I know many of you have questions about my background, my qualifications, and my relationship with Mr. Kane. So, let me be completely transparent." She took a breath and looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some hostile, some simply waiting to see what would happen next. 3 months ago, I was unemployed, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, and trying to figure out how to pay my student loans. I grew up in a family where we measured success in terms of keeping the electricity on and having enough food for dinner. I went to public schools, worked multiple jobs to pay for college, and graduated with a business degree and a mountain of debt. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I met Mr. Kane because I literally ran into him on Fifth Avenue while rushing to a job interview. He hired me not because of who I am or where I come from, but because he believed I could contribute something valuable to this company. Sofia's voice grew stronger. Over the past month, I've worked 16-hour days to learn every aspect of Kane Tech's operations. I've contributed to strategic planning sessions, participated in board meetings, and helped develop solutions to complex business challenges. I've done this not because I'm trying to manipulate anyone or gain some kind of inappropriate influence, but because I believe in this company and what it represents. Someone in the crowd called out, "What about your relationship with Mr. Kane?" Sofia felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away from the crowd. "What about it? We're two adults who respect each other professionally and care about each other personally. Neither of those facts has compromised our ability to do our jobs or serve this company's best interests. But surely you can see how the appearance of impropriety," Sofia interrupted, "exists only if you believe that a woman from my background is incapable of earning her position through merit, or that a man in Mr. Kane's position is incapable of making professional decisions based on qualifications rather than personal attraction." The auditorium was completely silent now. Sofia could see reporters frantically taking notes and cameras focused on her face. "I understand that many of you are concerned about stock volatility and media attention," Sofia continued. "But I would ask you to consider this. Would you rather have a leader who makes decisions based on what's right, or one who makes decisions based on what's convenient? Would you rather invest in a company that values innovation and merit, or one that perpetuates old boy networks and arranged marriages for business purposes?" She looked directly at Robert Harrington. "Mr. Harrington, you asked about the cost of speculation to shareholders. I would argue that the real cost would be if this company compromised its values to appease people who prefer business deals to authentic leadership." Sofia turned back to the full auditorium. "I know that my presence here has created complications. I know that some of you would prefer if I simply disappeared to make your lives easier. But I also know that the best companies are built by people who are willing to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult." She paused, looking out at the crowd one more time. "I'm not going anywhere. This company deserves leaders who choose courage over convenience, and I'm honored to work alongside someone who embodies that principle every day." Sofia stepped back from the microphone and returned to her seat, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the auditorium could hear it. The silence stretched for what felt like hours before someone in the back started clapping. The applause spread slowly at first, then more rapidly until roughly half the auditorium was clapping. It wasn't universal approval. Sofia could see plenty of disapproving faces and hostile stares, but it was enough to send a clear message that not everyone was willing to let fear and manipulation drive business decisions. Alexander stepped back to the microphone, and Sophia could see something in his expression that she had never seen before. Not just admiration or attraction, but something deeper and more profound. "Thank you, Miss Martinez," he said formally, though his eyes conveyed much more than his words. "That concludes our presentation today. We'll be happy to answer any additional questions about company operations through our normal investor relations channels." As the meeting broke up, Sophia found herself surrounded by a mix of reporters, investors, and Kane Tech employees. Some of the attention was hostile, but much of it was supportive. People who introduced themselves as small shareholders, employees from other departments, even a few board members who quietly expressed their approval of her speech. Penelope appeared at her elbow with the efficiency of a Secret Service agent, helping to navigate through the crowd toward the exit. "Well done, dear," she murmured. "That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both," Sophia replied, still feeling shaky from the adrenaline. They made it to the elevator bank before Alexander caught up with them, having been delayed by a cluster of board members who wanted to discuss the implications of the morning's events. "Sophia," he said as the elevator doors closed, "that was possibly career suicide. Incredible," Alexander finished. "I've never seen anyone handle hostile questioning like that." "I had good motivation," Sophia said, looking directly at him. "Someone recently taught me that some fights are worth the risk." Penelope cleared her throat. "If I might interrupt this moment of mutual admiration, we need to discuss strategy for the rest of the day. The phones are going to be ringing non-stop. The media is going to want follow-up interviews, and I suspect Eleanor Kane is going to have some very strong opinions about this morning's events." As if summoned by her name, Alexander's phone rang. The caller ID showed Eleanor Kane. "Should I answer it?" Alexander asked. "Might as well get it over with," Sophia said. "She's going to be furious regardless of when you talk to her." Alexander answered the phone, putting it on speaker so they could all hear. "Alexander." Eleanor's voice was ice-cold fury. "What exactly did you think you were accomplishing this morning?" "Good afternoon, Mother. I thought I was running a shareholders meeting. You thought you were running a publicity stunt for your little girlfriend. Do you have any idea how much damage you've done to the family reputation?" Sophia felt her cheeks burn, but Alexander's voice remained steady. "I was defending a valuable employee from unfair attacks." "A valuable employee." Eleanor's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Alexander, that girl just stood up in front of 500 people and announced that she's sleeping with you. She announced that we care about each other personally, which is hardly scandalous news. It's scandalous when it affects business relationships that took decades to build." Edward Langford is livid. Has already made calls to 3 congressional offices in the SEC. "You have until Monday to fix this situation, or he's going to make your life very difficult." The elevator reached their floor and they walked toward Alexander's office while Eleanor continued her tirade. "And another thing." Eleanor's voice crackled through the phone speaker. "I've spoken to several board members who are prepared to call for your removal if you don't start showing better judgment." "Let them try," Alexander said, settling into his chair. "I have enough shareholder support to survive a board challenge. Do you? Because I'm not sure your little speech this morning convinced anyone that you're capable of putting business interests ahead of personal desires." Sophia had heard enough. She reached for the phone, but Alexander shook his head, wanting to handle this himself. "Mother, I'm going to say this once, and I hope you'll listen carefully. I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity or Sophia's career to appease people who think business should be conducted like 18th century arranged marriages. If that disappoints you, I'm sorry, but I'm not changing my mind." "Then you're a fool," Eleanor said, and the line went dead. Alexander set down the phone and looked at Sophia and Penelope. "Well, that went about as well as expected." "Alexander," Sophia said quietly, "your mother is right about one thing. I am causing problems for you and the company. Maybe it would be better if Sophia Martinez, if you say you're quitting, I'm going to lock you in this office until you come to your senses." Penelope laughed despite the tension. "I'd like to see that. Sophia could probably take you in a fair fight. The point is," Alexander continued, standing up and moving to the window that overlooked Manhattan, "I'm not interested in running a company where good people are sacrificed for political convenience. If the board wants to remove me for that, then maybe this isn't the right company for me either." Sophia joined him at the window, watching the city bustle below them. "You'd really give all this up for me?" Alexander turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her heart stop. "Sophia, He'd give up everything for the chance to build something real with you. But I don't think it's going to come to that. How can you be so sure? Because, Alexander said with a smile that was pure confidence, we're about to show them that doing the right thing isn't just morally superior, it's also good business. Before Sophia could ask what he meant, Penelope appeared in the doorway with a stack of papers and an expression of barely contained excitement. Alexander, you're going to want to see this, she said, spreading the papers across his desk. The stock price has been climbing steadily since the shareholders' meeting ended. We're up 4.5 points in the last 2 hours. Alexander frowned. That doesn't make sense. The meeting was controversial at best. Apparently, Penelope said with a grin, investors like authenticity. There are already 3 major financial blogs praising Sophia's speech as an example of new leadership paradigms and values-based corporate culture. One analyst is calling it the most honest corporate communication he's seen in 20 years. Sophia stared at the papers in disbelief. Are you saying that my speech actually helped the stock price? I'm saying, Penelope replied, that sometimes telling the truth is the best business strategy of all. As the afternoon wore on, it became clear that the morning's events had indeed shifted public opinion in their favor. Social media was filled with supportive comments about Sophia's courage and Alexander's integrity. Several major investors called to express their increased confidence in CaneTech leadership. Even some of the board members who had been critical began to backtrack their positions. But Sophia knew that Eleanor Kane and Edward Langford weren't the type of people who gave up easily. The public relations victory was important, but the real battle was just beginning. That evening, as Sophia and Alexander worked late in his office, reviewing the day's developments, Penelope knocked on the door with a concerned expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something you both need to know, she said, settling into one of the chairs across from Alexander's desk. I've been hearing rumors from my contacts in other companies. Eleanor Kane has been making calls to major clients, suggesting that CaneTech might not be a reliable partner due to leadership instability. Alexander's jaw tightened. She's actively sabotaging the company. It appears so. And there's more. Edward Langford has apparently hired a crisis management firm to plant negative stories about Sophia in major media outlets. They're planning a coordinated attack over the next few weeks. Sophia felt her stomach drop. What kind of stories? The usual character assassination tactics, questions about your qualifications, implications about your motivations, perhaps some manufactured scandals to distract from the real issues. So, what do we do? Alexander asked. Penelope smiled, and there was something almost predatory about the expression. We fight back, but not the way they expect. What do you mean? I mean, Penelope said, pulling out her own folder of papers, that Eleanor Kane and Edward Langford aren't the only ones with powerful connections, and they're about to learn that underestimating Sophia Martinez was their first mistake. As Sophia looked at the determination in both Alexander's and Penelope's eyes, she realized that what had started as an accidental collision on Fifth Avenue had become something much bigger. Not just a love story, but a fight for the right to define success on their own terms. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, Sophia felt like they might actually have a chance to win. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a circuit board against the pre-dawn darkness. As Sophia Martinez stood on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse apartment, a cup of coffee warming her hands and a sense of anticipation thrumming through her veins. It had been 6 weeks since the shareholders' meeting that had changed everything, and today marked the culmination of the most intense period of her life. In the weeks following her public speech, Sophia had discovered that telling the truth in a corporate boardroom was apparently such a rare occurrence that it had made her something of a media sensation. Business schools were asking her to speak to students about authentic leadership in modern corporations. 3 major publishers had approached her about writing a book on values-based business practices. And most surprisingly, she had been invited to join the board of directors of 2 different nonprofit organizations focused on creating opportunities for first-generation college graduates in the business world. But perhaps the most significant development had been Penelope's revelation about the counteroffensive, as she had taken to calling it with obvious relish. It turned out that 30 years of working for powerful executives had given Penelope Reed a network of contacts that rivaled the CIA's intelligence-gathering capabilities. She knew where bodies were buried, which board members had undisclosed conflicts of interest, and exactly which politicians owed favors to whom. More importantly, she had been quietly documenting Eleanor Kane's attempts to sabotage CaneTech for weeks. building a case that would make it very difficult for the elder Kane to continue her campaign without facing serious legal consequences. The beauty of fighting people who think they're untouchable, Penelope had explained during one of their strategy sessions, is that they often forget to cover their tracks properly. Eleanor Kane has been so confident in her own immunity that she's left a paper trail a first-year law student could follow. The evidence Penelope had gathered was damning. Recorded phone calls where Eleanor explicitly discussed damaging Kane Tech's business relationships, emails coordinating media attacks on Sophia, and financial records showing payments to private investigators and crisis management firms. Most damaging of all were text messages between Eleanor and Edward Langford, discussing their plan to force Alexander out of his own company and install a more manageable CEO who would be properly grateful for their support. Today was the day they would present all of this evidence to Kane Tech's board of directors in what Alexander had privately dubbed the nuclear option. It was a calculated risk that could either end the conflict decisively in their favor or escalate it to levels that might destroy relationships permanently. But after weeks of watching his mother systematically attempt to destroy both his company and the woman he loved, Alexander had decided that some relationships weren't worth preserving. "You're up early," Alexander said, stepping onto the balcony with his own coffee cup. Even at 6:0 inches the morning, he looked perfectly put together, though Sophia had learned to read the subtle signs of stress in the way he held his shoulders and the slight tightness around his eyes. "Couldn't sleep," Sophia admitted, leaning into his warmth as he wrapped an arm around her. "Big day ahead. Nervous. Terrified," Sophia said honestly, but also excited. "Is that weird?" Alexander chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest where Sophia's head rested against his shoulder. "If it is, then we're both weird. I feel like we're about to either win the war or go down in the most spectacular corporate flameout in recent history." "Well, when you put it like that, how could I be nervous?" They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the city wake up below them. Sophia still sometimes felt like she was living someone else's life when she looked out at Manhattan from the 42nd floor of a building that Alexander owned outright. The penthouse was beautiful, but not ostentatious, more like a very expensive version of a normal home than the kind of billionaire's palace she had imagined before she'd known any actual billionaires. "Sophia," Alexander said quietly, "I need to tell you something before we go into battle today." She tilted her head to look at him, noting the serious expression on his face. "That sounds ominous." "It's not ominous. It's just important." Alexander turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Whatever happens today, whether we win, lose, or end up in some kind of corporate stalemate, I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me." Sophia felt her heart skip a beat. "Alexander, I know the timing is terrible. I know we're in the middle of a crisis that makes normal relationship development impossible. But I also know that I love you, Sophia Martinez, and I want to build a life with you, regardless of what happens with Kane Tech or my family or any of the external chaos." Sophia stared at him for a moment, taking in the vulnerability in his green eyes and the way his hands trembled slightly as they held hers. "You love me, completely, desperately, in a way that probably violates several principles of sound business judgment." Sophia laughed, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Well, that's convenient because I love you too, completely, desperately, and in a way that definitely violates everything my parents taught me about not getting involved with my boss." Alexander's smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "So, what do we do about it?" "We win today," Sophia said firmly. "We prove that doing the right thing isn't just morally superior, but also good business. We show everyone that authentic leadership and genuine relationships can create more value than political maneuvering and arranged marriages. And then we figure out what comes next together." Alexander leaned down and kissed her, and Sophia felt the same electric connection that had sparked between them from the moment Shed rolled over his Ferrari's hood 6 weeks ago. But now it was deeper, richer, tempered by shared challenges and mutual respect, and the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. "We should probably get ready," Alexander said reluctantly, though he made no move to let go of her. "Probably," Sophia agreed, equally reluctant to break the moment. They were interrupted by the sound of Alexander's phone ringing from inside the apartment. He groaned and went to answer it, returning a few minutes later with a grim expression. "That was Penelope," he said. "My mother just arrived at the Kane Tech building with what appears to be a team of lawyers and a representative from the Langford family legal team. She's making her move. Looks like it. Apparently, she's calling an emergency board meeting to discuss my fitness to lead the company and demanding an immediate vote of no confidence. Sophia felt her stomach drop. Can she do that? She can try. But Penelope says our supporters on the board are ready, and the evidence we've gathered should be enough to turn this around. Alexander's expression was determined, but worried. Sophia, you don't have to be there for this. It's going to get ugly, and there's no reason for you to be in the line of fire. Alexander Kane, Sophia said, borrowing Penelope's tone of voice. If you think I'm going to let you face Eleanor Kane alone after everything we've been through, you obviously still don't understand who you're dealing with. I was hoping you'd say that. Alexander admitted with a smile, but I had to offer. Offering is fine. Just don't expect me to take you up on it. An hour later, Sophia found herself walking into the Kane Tech building beside Alexander and Penelope, all three of them dressed like they were going to war, which, in a sense, they were. The lobby was buzzing with unusual activity for 8 on a Saturday morning, and Sophia could see several unfamiliar faces in expensive suits who were obviously not regular employees. The cavalry has arrived, Penelope murmured as they approached the elevator bank. Eleanor brought Edward Langford, Victoria, and what appears to be half of Manhattan's most expensive legal talent. And what did we bring? Sophia asked. The truth, Alexander replied, and Penelope's terrifying organizational skills. Don't forget Sophia's ability to inspire people with radical concepts like honesty and integrity, Penelope added with a grin that was slightly predatory. That's been surprisingly effective so far. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt simultaneously too long and too short. Sophia could feel the tension radiating from Alexander, though his expression remained calm and confident. She reached for his hand and squeezed it gently, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. Whatever happens, she whispered, we're in this together. Together. Alexander agreed, squeezing back. The elevator doors opened to reveal what looked like a corporate war zone. Eleanor Kane had established herself in the main conference room with her team of advisors, while several board members huddled in smaller groups throughout the floor, clearly choosing sides for the coming battle. Victoria Langford stood near the windows in a white suit that made her look like an ice queen. And Edward Langford was on his phone with someone who was apparently very important given the deference in his voice. Alexander, Eleanor said as soon as she saw them, her voice carrying across the floor like a royal proclamation. I'm glad you're here. We have important matters to discuss. Mother, Alexander replied evenly. I understand you've called an emergency board meeting. I've called a meeting to address the crisis of leadership that's been undermining this company for weeks. Edward has some very serious concerns about Kane Tech's stability and its ability to maintain important business relationships. Edward Langford ended his phone call and approached them with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Alexander, Sophia, I hope we can resolve this situation in a way that's beneficial for everyone involved. That depends on what you consider beneficial, Alexander replied. What I consider beneficial, Edward said, is a return to responsible leadership and an end to the personal drama that's been damaging Kane Tech's reputation and stock performance. Sophia felt her temper rise at the implication that she was merely personal drama, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was exactly the kind of reaction they were hoping for, an emotional outburst that could be used as evidence of her unfitness for a corporate environment. I'm curious, Mr. Langford, Sophia said with perfect professionalism, how exactly you measure the damage to Kane Tech's reputation, because the financial metrics I've seen suggest that the company is performing better than it has in years. Edward's smile tightened slightly. Financial performance is important, Miss Martinez, but it's not the only measure of corporate health. Investor confidence, regulatory relationships, political stability, all of these factors contribute to long-term success. And all of these factors have been deliberately undermined by people who are more interested in personal vendettas than business success. Penelope said, appearing at Sophia's elbow with a stack of folders that everyone recognized as evidence of some kind. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she focused on Penelope. I don't believe anyone asked for your opinion, Penelope. Actually, said a voice from behind them. I did. Everyone turned to see Vanessa Whitmore, one of the most respected board members and a woman whose opinion carried significant weight in corporate circles. She was accompanied by Robert Harrington and 2 other board members who had been wavering in their support. Vanessa, Eleanor said, clearly not pleased by this development. I wasn't aware you were planning to attend this meeting. When someone calls an emergency board meeting to question the leadership of a CEO whose company has increased profits by 18% in the last quarter, I make it my business to attend," Vanessa replied coolly. "Especially when that same CEO has demonstrated more integrity and strategic thinking than I've seen in 20 years of corporate governance. I think," Alexander said quietly, "that we should move this discussion to the boardroom where it can be conducted properly." 20 minutes later, the Kane Tech Board of Directors was assembled around the massive conference table that had hosted countless strategic decisions over the years. Sophia sat in a chair along the wall, technically present as Alexander's executive assistant, but actually there as moral support and potential witness to whatever was about to unfold. Eleanor Kane stood at the head of the table like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today because Kane Tech Industries faces a crisis of leadership that threatens everything we've built over the past decade. My son has allowed personal relationships to compromise his judgment, damage important business alliances, and create unnecessary volatility in our stock price." She gestured towards Sophia without looking at her directly. "The situation with Miss Martinez has become a distraction that we can no longer afford. Edward Langford has made it clear that continuing regulatory protection and political support depend on a return to stable, responsible leadership." Edward nodded gravely. "I've spent considerable political capital over the years ensuring that Kane Tech enjoys favorable treatment from regulatory agencies and congressional committees. That protection is contingent on confidence in the company's leadership and its commitment to maintaining important relationships. In other words," Alexander said quietly, "you're threatening to use your political connections to damage the company if I don't marry your daughter. I'm offering to continue protecting the company if you demonstrate better judgment about priorities," Edward replied smoothly. Vanessa Whitmore leaned forward. "Mr. Langford, are you seriously suggesting that a CEO's personal relationships should be subject to political approval? I'm suggesting that CEOs of major corporations have responsibilities that extend beyond their personal preferences, and I'm suggesting," Penelope said, standing up with her stack of folders, "that this entire conversation is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who's been threatening whom." Eleanor's eyes flashed dangerously. "Penelope, you're out of line." "Am I?" Penelope moved to the presentation screen at the front of the room and connected her laptop because I have some very interesting documentation that suggests otherwise. What followed was the most methodical destruction of a reputation that Sophia had ever witnessed. Penelope presented phone recordings, email chains, financial transactions, and text messages that painted a clear picture of Eleanor Kane and Edward Langford systematically attempting to damage Kane Tech's business relationships, manipulate media coverage, and force Alexander into an unwanted marriage through economic coercion. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Eleanor's face grew paler with each revelation, while Edward Langford's expression shifted from confident to concerned to genuinely alarmed. "Where did you get these recordings?" Eleanor demanded when Penelope played a particularly damning phone conversation in which Eleanor explicitly discussed sabotaging Kane Tech's relationship with a major client. "From people who believe that business should be conducted ethically," Penelope replied calmly. "It's amazing how many executives are willing to document conversations when they're concerned about legal liability." Robert Harrington was studying the financial records Penelope had distributed. "Eleanor, these payments to crisis management firms and private investigators, did you authorize these expenditures from your personal accounts?" "I was protecting the family's interests," Eleanor said defensively, "by sabotaging the family business." Vanessa's voice was sharp with disapproval. "Eleanor, you've been actively working to damage the company your son runs. How is that protecting anyone's interests?" "Alexander has lost perspective," Eleanor replied, though her voice was less certain now. "Has making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. Like the decision to hire someone who's increased departmental efficiency by 23%, Penelope asked, consulting her notes. Or the decision to pursue international expansion strategies that have generated $47 million in new revenue. Or perhaps the decision to implement employee satisfaction programs that have reduced turnover by 35%. Sophia blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized that her contributions were being tracked so precisely or that they had been so measurably successful. All of Sophia's initiatives have been documented and analyzed, Alexander said, pride evident in his voice. Her impact on this company has been entirely positive regardless of our personal relationship. This is ridiculous. We're talking about a secretary who's been here for 6 weeks. We're talking about an executive assistant who has contributed more to this company's success in 6 weeks than some board members have in 6 years. Vanessa replied tartly. And frankly, Victoria, your family's attempts to manipulate this situation through threats and coercion have been far more damaging than any personal relationship. I don't have to listen to these accusations. Eleanor, I think we should reconsider our approach to this situation. Sit down, Edward, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Senator William Harrison, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and Sophia realized with growing amazement Edward Langford's political mentor and biggest supporter. Senator Harrison, Edward said, clearly surprised. I wasn't expecting you. I'm sure you weren't. Senator Harrison replied, entering the room with the kind of presence that came from 30 years in politics. Especially given the phone calls I've been receiving about your attempts to use committee influence for personal business purposes. Edward went pale. Senator, I can explain. You can explain why you've been threatening regulatory action against a major American corporation because they won't participate in your daughter's marriage arrangements. I'd be very interested in that explanation, Edward. Sophia watched the political calculation happening in real time as Edward Langford realized that his threats had backfired spectacularly. Apparently, using congressional influence to force marriages was frowned upon even in Washington. Furthermore, Senator Harrison continued, I've reviewed Caintech's compliance record and financial performance. This company is exactly the kind of American success story that Congress should be supporting, not threatening. He turned to Alexander with a slight smile. Mr. Cain, I apologize for any confusion about regulatory relationships. Caintech's status is based entirely on your company's merit, not on your personal decisions. Eleanor Cain appeared to age 10 years in 10 seconds as she realized that her master plan had not only failed, but had actually strengthened the very relationship she had been trying to destroy. Alexander, she said quietly, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Mother, Alexander replied firmly. We've been discussing this privately for weeks, and it's led to nothing but manipulation and threats. This ends today. He stood and addressed the board directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be completely clear about my position. Sophia Martinez is not just a valuable employee, she's the woman I love and intend to marry. Anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with me directly, but I won't tolerate attempts to damage her reputation or threaten this company's success. The silence that followed was broken by Vanessa Whitmore's slow clap. Well said, Alexander, and for the record, I move that we formally commend both you and Miss Martinez for your contributions to Caintech's continued success. Seconded, said Robert Harrington, who had apparently been completely won over by Penelope's presentation. All in favor? Vanessa asked. Every hand in the room went up except for Eleanor's and Victoria's. Even Edward Langford, apparently realizing which way the political wind was blowing, voted in favor. As the meeting broke up, Eleanor Cain gathered her papers with as much dignity as she could muster. She paused at the door to look back at Alexander and Sophia. I hope you know what you're doing, Alexander, she said quietly. For the first time in my life, Mother, I do, Alexander replied. After everyone else had left, Alexander, Sophia, and Penelope found themselves alone in the boardroom, surrounded by the evidence of their victory and the debris of the most intense corporate battle any of them had ever experienced. So, Sophia said, breaking the silence, that went well. Alexander laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. Sophia Martinez, you have a gift for understatement. It's one of my many talents, Sophia replied with a grin. Along with accidentally destroying business dynasties and inspiring boardroom revolts, Penelope was organizing her files with the satisfaction of someone who had just won a particularly challenging chess match. I have to say, in 30 years of corporate warfare, I've never seen anything quite like that. What happens now? Sophia asked. Now, Alexander said, moving to stand beside her. We run a company together without interference from people who think business should be conducted like medieval politics. And, personally, Sophia asked, looking up at him with eyes that sparkled with mischief. Personally, Alexander said, dropping to one knee beside her chair, I was hoping you might consider making our partnership official. Sophia's heart stopped as Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Alexander, you're not Sophia Martinez, Alexander said, opening the box to reveal a ring that was elegant and beautiful, without being ostentatious. "Will you marry me? Not because it's good for business or politically advantageous, or because our families arranged it, but because I love you and can't imagine building a life with anyone else." Sophia stared at the ring, then at Alexander's face, then at Penelope, who was watching with barely contained delight. "You planned this," Sophia said accusingly to Penelope. "I may have helped with the timing," Penelope admitted, "and the ring selection and coordinating with Senator Harrison and possibly a few other details. You've been planning a proposal in the middle of a corporate coup." "Sophia," Alexander said gently, "I've been planning this proposal since the day you rolled over my car hood and told me exactly what you thought of rich guys. Everything else was just logistics." Sophia looked down at the ring again, then back at Alexander's face, and felt her heart overflow with love for this man who had been willing to risk everything for the chance to choose his own life. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, of course, yes." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her while Penelope applauded and took photos with her phone for what she insisted would be important historical documentation. "So what now?" Sophia asked when they finally broke apart. "Now," Alexander said, "we plan a wedding and run a company and prove that sometimes the best business decisions are the ones you make with your heart. Together," Sophia added. "Together," Alexander agreed. 6 months later, Sophia Martinez-Kane stood in the same boardroom where she had first defended her right to love whom she chose, looking out at the Manhattan skyline through windows that no longer seemed like barriers between worlds, but like views of infinite possibility. Kane Tech Industries had just announced its most profitable quarter in company history. Sophia had been promoted to Director of Strategic Development and had been invited to speak at 3 major business conferences about authentic leadership in modern corporations. Alexander had been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine as CEO of the Year for his commitment to values-based business practices. But perhaps most importantly, they had proven that love and success weren't mutually exclusive, that the best partnerships, whether in business or in life, were built on honesty, respect, and the courage to choose authenticity over convenience. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Kane?" Alexander asked, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that still made her heart skip beats. "Ready," Sophia replied, taking his hand and her coffee. "But first, Penelope left something on my desk that I need to show you." "What now?" Alexander asked with mock resignation. "Please tell me she's not planning another corporate revolution." "Not exactly," Sophia said with a grin. "But she did get a call from Harvard Business School. Apparently they want to write a case study about us, about how we accidentally revolutionized corporate governance by choosing love over politics." Alexander laughed, the sound echoing through the empty office. "Sophia Martinez-Kane, I think you're going to turn the entire business world upside down. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Ask me in a few years," Alexander said, pulling her close for a kiss. "But right now, I'm thinking it might be the best thing that's ever happened to corporate America." As they walked out of Kane Tech Industries that evening, hand in hand and ready to face whatever challenges came next, Sophia reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. A car accident had led to a job interview, which had led to a corporate battle, which had led to a love story that proved sometimes the most important collisions in life were the ones you never saw coming. "By the way," Alexander said as they waited for the elevator, "I have some news." "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Eleanor called today. She wants to have dinner to apologize and to meet her future daughter-in-law properly." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "And you said?" "I said we'd be delighted as long as she promises not to bring any lawyers, crisis management consultants, or politicians with hidden agendas." And she agreed. She agreed. Apparently, watching her son build a successful company while maintaining his integrity has given her a new perspective on what constitutes good business judgment. Sophia smiled as the elevator doors opened. "Well, that's progress. That's love," Alexander corrected. "Sometimes it just takes people a while to recognize it." As they descended toward the lobby and the life they were building together, Sophia thought about all the ways that love could transform not just individuals, but entire companies, families, and communities. She had learned that the most radical thing you could do in a world built on expectations and arrangements was to choose authenticity. To insist on building relationships based on truth rather than convenience. It wasn't always easy, and it certainly wasn't always safe. But as she looked at the ring on her finger and the man beside her, Sophia knew that some risks were not just worth taking. They were essential for becoming the person you were meant to be. The Ferrari was waiting for them in the parking garage, gleaming red under the fluorescent lights like a reminder of how their story had begun. But now, instead of a symbol of reckless wealth and privilege, it represented something else entirely. Proof that sometimes the most beautiful destinations were the ones you reached by accident with the right person beside you for the journey. "Ready for the ride home, Mrs. Kane?" Alexander asked, opening the passenger door with a theatrical flourish. "Always," Sophia replied, settling into the leather seat that had once seemed like luxury beyond her wildest dreams and now felt like coming home. "But this time, try not to hit any pedestrians." "I make no promises," Alexander said with a grin. After all, look how well it worked out the last time. As they pulled out into the Manhattan traffic, Sophia rolled down her window to feel the city air rush past her face. Somewhere out there were other people rushing to job interviews, other CEOs making impossible choices, other families struggling with the balance between tradition and change. And maybe, if they were very lucky, some of them would have their own collision with destiny, their own moment when everything they thought they knew about success and love and the right way to live would be turned completely upside down by an encounter they never saw coming. Because sometimes Sophia had learned the best things in life happened when you stopped trying to control every variable and started paying attention to the possibilities that emerged when different worlds collided. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to trust the collision instead of fighting it, you discovered that love really could conquer everything. Even corporate politics, family expectations, and the assumption that happiness was a luxury that successful people couldn't afford. The Ferrari accelerated into the Manhattan night, carrying two people who had learned that the most important business decision you could make was choosing to build a life based on what mattered most. Behind them, the Kane Tech building rose into the sky like a beacon of possibility, proof that companies could succeed by doing the right thing, and that sometimes the most profitable investment you could make was in the courage to be authentic. It had been quite a collision, and it was only the beginning.